Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me is a special guest today, Amy Potter from the Earth Creative. Amy is a Reiki master and an intuitive, and you work with horses. So today's topic is about horses and energy, or energy and horses. And it's something that still gets kind of put in the category of woo-woo.
Yeah.
So, as a complete geek, I want to look at that today because I work with horses' energy all the time. There's nothing mystical or magical about it.
Yeah.
And the little bit of research I did into the Heart Math Institute, like they really talk about that energetic field as a measurable field with people, it's about arm's length, maybe
Yep.
3, 4 feet.
Yeah.
And with horses, it's like naturally 10 to 15 feet.
Yeah.
Like it was amazing.
Yeah.
And I see that all the time. And
It,
so why don't you talk a little bit about what you do,
yeah.
um, and energy and horses? Because you had mentioned you got a really interesting question over your teaching weekend about
Yeah.
energy.
I know. And as she asked it, and when I finally came to the answer, I was like, oh, I can't wait to talk to Kirsten about this because it's so true. But first of all, thank you for having me on.
Mhm.
We host our own podcast, but it's a really different feeling to be on the other end of it. I'm just excited. I'm excited to be here, and I always love talking about energy and horses. And basically, I love your podcast name because I am totally a horse
Horse
geek,
geek.
a horse geek, like a little girl at heart forever when I'm around my horses or any horse. And it is mystical and magical for me, just in the feeling that it invokes being around them. But yeah, so this weekend I am a Reiki master and I got my first Reiki attunement, and Reiki translates to spiritually guided life force energy. So, a Reiki practitioner channels this universal life force energy, or the energy that animates us all living things on Earth, to help clear the body of any energetic blocks. And I can put it in terms of like a physical way of looking at it is because I also studied with Joanne Wilson and I'm trained in the Wilson Marr method of equine horse massage, or a sports massage. So, because I wanted to make what I do look less woo-woo in the beginning, I was like, oh, well, if I'm a massage therapist, then, I can use my energy work kind of in disguise. But so, in terms of like a muscle, when we treat a muscle, we're treating blocked energy, we're treating blocked tissue. So, we're putting a finger on the attachment point of the muscle and we're drawing in circulation to then expand and return the muscle to its full health. So, energy work, it's just works on a more sometimes physical but invisible level. So, we're removing or helping move blocks of energy in the body so the body can function at its optimal um, yeah, capacity. So,
And it
and
really is all energy.
it
Like,
is.
I mean,
It
we
is.
don't, it's like one word that encompasses
Yeah,
so much of just what we can't see,
right.
but we
Exactly.
can feel it.
Yeah.
We
Exactly.
can
Just like you
sense it.
can
Hmm.
completely, like you can sense somebody's energy when they walk in the room. When they walk in the room and they're in a bad mood, you're like, whoo, you can feel that. If somebody
Yes.
walks in the room and is in their heart and in their light, you're like, yeah, I want to be around that person. I mean, energy it's palpable, even if we can't see it, right? So I used my horses this weekend and I did my first Reiki training. And yeah, like I said, I've got my first attunement in 2017. I became a Reiki master in 2018. And then I'm actually trained in two different lines of Reiki. One is the traditional Usui Ryoho, for those of you listening who may even know Reiki. And then I'm also trained in the Holy Fire 2 line. And I got that my second master certification or attunement a couple years ago. I want to say in 2022. So to be a master teacher, a Reiki master, you're a Reiki master teacher, and you've agreed to pass on and train this method of healing to other people. So I put it off for many years and finally had my first class. And I used my horses in the training because horses are such mirrors of our energy. That I was like, oh, this will be a really fun experiment because Reiki, you can send energy across space and time. Energy knows no boundaries, right? So I thought, I was like, well, we'll go test this out with the horses and we can send them this Reiki healing and we can see, and they also have very physical responses to energy work. So, like one of my horses, he really is probably the reason why I dove so deeply into energy work is he's a very difficult horse. He had lots of issues, and so and he's also super sensitive. And when I remember vetting him, and when I was vetting him, we were doing X-rays, and he fell asleep in my arms. I was at his head, and True North did the and Dr. Hancock didn't do the vetting
Hmm.
that her vets did. So I've known Anne Marie for many, many moons. And I actually was talking to her the other day and credit her for my healing and Reiki journey as well. So, because I was doing energy work even before I started training in Reiki. But so I call his Elvis or Elvish, but we were vetting and they were, I think, X-raying his stifles. So the plate has to go very far up,
Right.
kind of into the groin area, right?
Hmm.
And he is just like passed out. His eyes are closed and his all his weight is in my arms. And I'm like, I was like, this is a very special connection. Um, so he's very sensitive to energy. So I took my class there and I had a city girl in the class and she was so excited to work with horses, but she's like, I don't know anything about them. And like, how do I introduce myself to your
Hmm.
horses? How do people introduce themselves to horses? And I was so stumped by this. And usually I'm not stumped. I usually have a pretty intuitive, quick answer to things. And I'm like, gosh, like, I don't know. She's like, do you reach your hand out like you would with a dog? I'm like, no. And so I was like, let me think on that. Let me think on that. And so we went back the next day, and immediately I was like, oh, Emmy, you introduce yourself to horses with your energy. I was like, they have, like you said, this huge energetic field. So they feel you coming even before you even know you've entered their energetic field. So let's come into our hearts and let's come into this place. So Reiki really brings us into balance between earth and spirit. It really brings us into our heart centers and um, into a place that would be very friendly for a horse to receive, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, gosh, yeah, we introduce ourselves through energy to horses.
And that's
Uh,
such a normal part. Like I remember sort of laughing. There was a study that came out maybe a couple years ago that animals it's now proven scientifically that animals have emotions and express emotions. And
oh, yeah.
all of us animal people are like, duh.
Yeah.
But
Duh.
of course they do. And but it was a big like scientific paper that
Yeah.
came out that proved it, right?
Right.
And the same thing sort of with energy. Like I've had experiences where one of my horses went out with, my boyfriend for a jog down the road, and the
Mhm.
other two horses left at the property were sort of distressed. So I was working with one of them, and we were on like the side of the house where you couldn't see the gate. You could hear it if the horse came back, but you couldn't see it. And I was working one horse, and the other horse was sort of running back and forth between me and the gate and sort of
Mhm.
distraught that his buddy was out on the road somewhere. And then he came over and kind of settled by where I was working the other horse. And before I heard the gate, and we couldn't see it, neither one of us could see it, neither one of us heard it, that loose horse knew the other horse was back. Like just suddenly calmed down and went,
Oh,
ah,
okay.
she's back, right? And then about 3 seconds later, I heard the gate. But it wasn't something we could see and we couldn't hear
Right.
the noise. And he knew anyways the
Yeah.
second she was back. And I go, those kind of things happen all the time.
Yeah.
And I go, their five senses are something we can't always fathom. But
Yeah.
I go, that sensitivity to energy makes what seems woo-woo or crazy magic just part
Yeah.
of normal everyday horse world.
For sure. For sure. And I I did a through True North again. They hosted a clinic with Charlotte Cannon, and an amazing spirit in her own right. And she talked a lot about how our horses mirror our energies. And like as somebody who practices energy work professionally, I was like, yeah, I mean, it was something I was really interested to see her take on it. But I'd never looked at it in the way that she described it. And horses as prey, and it made so much sense and it totally clicked. That when I'm doing Reiki on a horse, I'm actually engaging their parasympathetic nervous system so that it activates their rest and digest mode so the body can self-heal. Um, and so, but what she describes is that when we can be masters of our own energy, as like self-protection, the horses get, or as a response to, okay, it is now safe that I can go into rest and digest mode. So the whole basis is to come into balance in your own body, to give permission to your horse then to come into balance in their body and feel safe and relaxed. And when you're relaxed, like the fluidity of movement is there. When you're tense, the fluidity of movement isn't there. So I was like, oh yeah, so I'm basically working with the nervous system. Like in a
Mhm.
scientific level, I'm working with the nervous system. But on a woo-woo level, when we are in balance in our bodies. We're deeply grounded and connected to this earth energy. And when we are connected, so you can describe it in terms of yin and yang. Yin being the masculine, the doing energy, and the yang being this receptive, this energy of Mother Earth. This receptive mode. When I'm healing or when I'm working, I'm really um, helping balance the body. So when I have my hands on a horse and I'm working with their energetic field, I really am in a state of receptivity. So I get a lot of information. So, and energy is transmitted, information is transmitted through energy too. So
Absolutely.
basically, I call myself a Reiki master and intuitive because when I started my journey with Reiki, um, immediately I would receive information of where in the body energy was blocked. So my hands would naturally be drawn to the heart or the sacrum, and so it feels intuitive, but I really feel like we're just in a beautiful place of receiving energetic information, basically. So,
Well,
well,
and
it's
it is information and it is a measurable force. Like if I work with the nervous system as well, and on a really, I bring it down to such a practical level
Mhm.
that basically, if you think of the nervous system functioning, it generates different energies. Emotions are going to generate different types of
Yeah,
energies, different amounts of energies, which
yep,
is just an invisible force like wind or humidity. I
yeah,
go,
yeah.
it's an invisible force, but we can feel it. And
That's a really great way of talking about it. I'm
yeah,
scooching.
so what I call it in my training is the learning frame of mind. But I go,
Ah,
what that essentially means is if we're not training for the learning frame of mind, then a lot of the horse problems we have are just a state of defensiveness because the fight, flight,
yeah,
sympathetic nervous system is dominating the show.
yeah,
And that produces tangible, measurable, observable changes in
absolutely.
emotional energy, which
Yeah,
is like a force. So you being very sensitive to those intangible forces or invisible forces. I shouldn't
yeah,
say intangible. You're just very sensitive to the invisible forces and can
yeah,
sort of feel maybe bumps in the road. Like that's a bit
yeah.
beyond me. But I
Yeah, no, no,
go,
no. That's exactly what it feels like. Yeah.
yeah, but emotional energy is sort of broadcasted. Like if we just kind of tune into it,
Right. And I mean, I that is in our Western world, and I work with a lot of horses. I work with humans and horses, but so much of the problems that we have with our equine human relationship can be solved by coming into that place of receptivity or engaging that parasympathetic or the learning brain, because we in the Western world want to do. I see it over and over again. We show up to the barn and we're like, I only have an hour and a half to be at the barn. And so what do? You rip the blankets off, you groom, you throw the tack on. And like horses move so slowly naturally, I mean, and our way of being in the world as
It's not
Western
slow.
humans, it's not slow. And so what are you doing to your horse even from the minute you walk in the barn because you just drove here from work and you're thinking about work? You're
Right.
bringing all of this to the relationship immediately.
Yeah.
And so they're not engaging in the learning. So like
Or they're
half
like,
of what I
whoa.
do. Yeah. They're like, "Ugh, slow your roll, human." So, yeah, so often, I mean, often I encourage, after I've worked on the horse side, like I encourage them, I was like, you need a day or you need, I mean, more than a day, but one of the things that I say over and over and over again is slow down and connect with your horse before you even start doing anything with your horse. Like
Yeah.
breathe. I have an exercise where um, I have them put the hand on the chest or the hand on their shoulder and another hand, it's like right below the withers. It's the brachial chakra. And the brachial chakra is specific to domesticated animals, and it's an extension of the heart chakra. And chakra is just a fancy way of saying like like a concentration of energy.
Hmm.
Um, and they spin like a wheel. When they're healthy, there's a lot of moving energy. But the brachial chakra, I also call like the tattletale chakra, because the horses, when I put my hands there, will usually show any issues, and a lot of the times it's way in their past, but they show trauma there with the human horse connection. That's so I
Mm.
call it the tattletale chakra, but it's also the chakra where the person and the animal connect. Like this is a chakra, and it's where we sit on them too. It's an extension of the heart chakra. So a hand on the withers and a hand on the chest or the shoulder, and you're just connecting
Mm.
until and most of the time, both horse and rider will go
Yeah.
and take a big deep breath. And like that's this place of fluidity, of flow, of easeful motion, right? It starts there. It starts in the energy. And if you don't have that place of relaxation, you're going to have a whole slew of physical problems as a result of it, right? So,
Yeah, and to make major turnarounds with whether the horse was sort of anxious or aggressive or the person was, like to bring that together, I put together a whole workbook called Basic Handling, and I go slowing things down to where you're working on like sit and make eye contact with your horse or touch your horse or
yeah,
just let things settle
yeah,
or how you pick up the feet, how you lead, how you catch, all of those things
right.
we do with our horses every day
Yeah.
provided a huge place to shift that entire relationship with both person and horses
Oh, for
coming
sure.
into the learning frame of mind,
Yeah.
parasympathetic or
Yep.
cohesion. And
Yeah.
what I found so great about science was like I knew if the horse had calm energy and could mentally focus, ears on me, was connected to me mentally, was physically relaxed with me around them, that everything else went easier.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then science provided the proof. But I
Right.
go, it's kind of in hindsight sometimes that you
Yeah.
go, you know when it's right.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science.
Right.
It feels calm and soft and lovely,
Yeah.
and there's a willing participation
Yeah.
on both sides.
Yep.
And I go, that to me is a foundation for learning anything new. And
Oh,
I think
yeah.
like without that, when I see people rush through stuff or get after their horse or their horse is stressed and they're putting the bridle on anyways, tacking up
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's not going to suddenly get better as you make your tasks more and more complicated.
Yeah. Yep.
Like if they,
Exactly.
yeah,
From you know probably more. I'm sure you know more about the science of it and the hormones that go through the body in stress. Like you don't learn in a place of stress. So,
there's
or you
actually
can learn.
proof. There's
Yeah.
actually proof that in dominance of the fight flight sympathetic nervous system, it actually feeds the limbic part of the brain. And only in the parasympathetic nervous system do you really feed the frontal cortex or the more thinking part of the brain.
Yeah.
I go, so it's not something we can help. It's like you literally kind of can't think when
Right.
you're under stress.
I mean, it takes me back to like college where I'm well studied for an exam, and all of a sudden, like my nerves get in there, and you're like, but I know the answer. Like, why can't I
Yes,
find it?
you can't access
So,
it.
right, right.
Yes,
So, I mean, but
exactly.
it really is in a lot of ways like all about energy. It's like if we can come into balance in our bodies, then everything becomes easy, like you
Yeah.
said.
And
So,
even Candace Pert, she was just
oh, I
this
don't know her.
Candace Pert, she's since passed, but I think she started her research in like the 70s on opiate receptors and receptors in the body. And she's written a couple of books. I think her first one was The Molecules of Emotion, very scientific, hard to get
Yeah.
through. But basically, long story short, she ended up after studying sort of how chemistry works through the body related to
Hmm.
emotions and body functions that she was famous for saying we are much more like flickering flames than we are meat and bone. You know,
Oh,
that
wow.
our
Yeah.
whole existence, when you get into that level of detail of how body chemistry works, how hormone release works, how that influences our thoughts, our emotions, and vice versa, and changes our energetic field.
Yeah.
Like all of that is just a living, breathing body.
Yeah.
I go, it's
Yeah.
happening all the time.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I just keep thinking it is my own struggle with woo woo and not woo woo and embracing like the magical and the mystical. But you think of like the human body and it is sort of miraculous, right?
It is, yeah,
That like you just go, it is, I mean, just to understand how the body is animated. And I'm just sitting with the flickering flame. Like our bodies are more like a flickering flame than what
hunks
flesh and
of meat.
bones.
Yeah.
Then yeah, yeah,
No, and I find like my interest in science, because science by definition is slow and thorough.
yeah,
So I go, it's always going to be explaining what is already real and happening.
yeah,
And when I look at like the more modern science and quantum, I go now, instead of thinking in terms of even atoms and protons and neutrons, all of existence is boiled down to bosons and fermions, which is just invisible particles and
right.
forces. I
Yeah.
go, that's it. It's
Yep.
invisible particles and forces
AKA
and
energy, right?
energy. And the Higgs field, like the
Yep.
glue, that's the invisible glue that binds everything. All of that is just modern science now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's always been.
Yeah.
And so I
I mean, to
go,
me, it's explaining the unexplainable. I mean, we can explain it, or it's explaining the mystery of being alive and the mysteries of the
exactly.
universe. So
No, so
putting
I
it,
don't doubt when people say, they have some of these woo-woo abilities. I go, it's not something I doubt
yeah,
that is
yeah,
possible.
yeah,
And I don't have to believe in it because there's a lot of modern science that sort of says, hey, this is very real.
yeah, yeah,
And some people are more sensitive to it like you are, but it's like I'm more sensitive to horses' energy than
yeah,
other people are. And
yeah.
that's just a skill you cultivate.
For sure. And I mean, I think that yeah, the more that we slow down and really listen to what our bodies are telling us as these receivers of information. Anybody can be intuitive. That's, I mean, yeah. So, but you reminded me of, I wanted to tell, it was one of my early clients, and I think horses, because of their amazing ability to mirror energy and for us to visibly see it. Like when I come into a horse's stall, but like I have a new client actually. It's not so new. I've been working with him for about 8 months, maybe. But he now lays down for every one of our sessions. I come into the stall and he's like, "Oh, Amy's here," and I'll start doing Reiki. And he'll munch on his hay for a little bit, and then he will, when he's ready to like really receive the energy, he lines up in the back of his stall, and he's like, "Okay, I'm ready." And then I send more energy, and in 5, 10 minutes, his head is almost to the ground, and he goes in this. I mean, so humans, like they're on my table and they close their eyes and and I can feel what's going on in their body, but and sometimes they'll yawn or I feel their breathing change or something. But horses show you very dramatically that energy is real. Like
Yeah.
I mean, they are the most amazing teachers. So I've been working on this horse in the last 4 or 5 sessions. He laid down once for me early on because he just was holding so much. But like how cool that this horse feels safe enough to now lay down
Yeah.
almost every session, and like I'll curl up with him and we just process. And a lot of the processing I'm doing with him is emotional. He's had a lot of people maybe with good intentions um, not care for him and not listen to him, and told lots of, like, he was a bad horse because he was stopping, and like it was
Mm.
all mental. And like we did imaging and it is not all mental. He's got some very serious physical problems and was trying to tell his humans that, and we don't listen.
Yeah.
So anyway, but a lot of that is just clearing the emotional aspect of being told that you're bad and beaten to try to get over a fence and all of that things. But so horses, they give us physical proof that doing energy work has a real effect. And one of the early horses that I worked on, and I also work with crystals to help or augment or assist in just my hands-on healing.
Hmm.
And one of the stones that I carry frequently is smoky quartz. It's a very grounding stone. And by grounding, like when we ground, that makes us feel like, think of roots, like a tree being very rooted. You feel stable, you feel safe, you feel confident. So when we're grounded, that's really where I start most of the time with horses and myself. Like we ground together. And when we're
Hmm.
grounded and connected to this earth energy or the yin energy, then we can be receivers basically. But we start with being grounded. So this mare had lost her longtime turnout buddy. The buddy had moved off the farm and they'd been turned out for, I don't know, like 10 years, I want to say, together. And she just lost her mind. I mean, she was distraught. She wouldn't eat. They didn't want to turn her out anymore because she would just pace and pace. And I can't remember why they didn't want to, maybe they did introduce another buddy to her. And she just was so attached that she just couldn't come back down into the body and was physically stressed. So I came and the owner and I are chatting, and I'm just casually sending Reiki to her, this universal life force energy. And you can also, there's different symbols you're attuned to, and one of them is for emotional healing. So I'm sending her that just to try to calm her down. And all of a sudden, like something kicks in, and she's like, "Oh, thank you." And like takes this big deep breath, goes over to her grain, like starts nibbling on the grain. And the owner's like, "Oh my God, she hasn't eaten for 2 days. Like this is so great." And again, engaging the rest digest, the
Yeah.
parasympathetic system. And then so the owner leaves and she's like, "I'll just let you guys work here." She's like, "I think even my stress is like winding her up because I'm so worried about her." I was like, "Yeah." So she walks away and I was like, "Oh, good." Because I was very insecure about using my crystals. So I pull out, and I said it here. So I pull out this ginormous
Oh my gosh.
smoky,
Yeah.
this smoky quartz that's like hanging in my pocket, and I pull it out and put it at her root chakra. And I mean, she just junk, like goes into that. I mean, her nose is on the ground and she must have stayed there for 20, 30 minutes just letting and I had been sending Reiki. I think that so let me back up because I had been sending Reiki to her and I was like, okay, I could physically see she was enjoying it, but I was like, you know what? Let me see what happens when I pull out this crystal. And then it was an immediate dramatic reaction. So crystals have their own energetic frequency and their own energetic vibration. And this
Mm.
particularly helps connect us to that earth energy. And in seconds, like I think I did take videos. And if I was smart, I would have queued some of them up to share,
Yeah.
but maybe you'll have me on again and we can geek out more on energy work. But I mean, it
Well,
was
and
a
this does go out to podcast platforms where it's only on YouTube. People
oh
can see the
yeah,
video.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was astonishing even for me. Like I had been working with crystals myself, and I know what I feel when I pick them up, and they felt real to me and the effect that they could change in my physical or emotional or mental or spiritual body. Um, um, but to see the physical response, instant physical response, because it was just in my pocket and I put it
Yeah.
on right above her tail, and she just whoop, like just drops down into this like deep, 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 relaxed state. So I was like, I mean, I was blown away, really.
It really does show you like the response. It's not something they do to please us. It's not
Yeah,
something they do as a conditioned response. It's just an organic kind of dynamic thing. And I agree with you. They sort of show us over and over that they actually communicate and sense on a much more subtle level than we
yeah.
do. And
Oh yeah,
we can learn to tune ourselves to
yeah,
that
for
level.
sure.
Like that's kind of part of training to me is refining our own level of sensitivity to even
Yeah,
get near where our horse is. But
for
that
sure.
brings me to a question I have, because this is a long-term question. When
Yeah.
people say the horse is always mirroring you,
Uh-huh.
one of the questions I have is it kind of leads me to think that then I'm responsible for the horse's emotional state, which I fight against a little bit only because I see horses as sovereign individuals with their own moods, their own deal. So, what do you mean when you say, because I've had some clients who are just suffering from like new age guilt that they're not in
Mhm.
the right space to go see their horse. And I'm like, go see your horse, right?
Yeah.
Don't, you guys are two individuals like a married
Yes.
couple or siblings. Go see your horse because you're not responsible entirely for how
No.
your horse feels.
I think it's such a layered question. And the immediate response, the simple response is what I mean by horses mirror your internal state is first, I mean, they are prey animals. So if you're going to come into the barn in high stress, your own fight or flight, they're going to show that back to you a lot of the times.
Mm,
I have one horse though, and you are right. And like, so my horse, Elvish, if I come into the barn like that, and I would not say we work on, it's a funny thing. So we work on his sovereignty. We work on him being responsible for his own emotions. Oh, it's
mm.
something. And um, I even had a mantra. You've had Marcia on your podcast. Have you had
I have
Marcia?
not had
Okay.
Marcia.
So
Mm-mm.
she works with True North as well. And she was also, I mean, True North really opened me up to this energy work and the Reiki work that I do. So Marcia is an intuitive and energy healer that True North Vet works with as well. So she and I were working on Elv, and he was just, I mean, he had Lyme disease and ulcers and EPM, and he was a homebred. I was his first human after the homebred situation, and his mother died young. He didn't get turned out with other horses because they came from the hunter jump. I do the hunter jumpers, so
Hmm.
he was very isolated. So he never got to learn how to be a horse. He never got to be socialized with other horses. The mother teaches manners. So and the way he was brought up, um, she was old school hunter jumper that you just beat the horses into submission, right? I was
Mm.
watching him go and I was like, yeah, he's really heavy on the forehand. And in my head, I'm thinking, I had looked at the angles of his feet and I was like, oh, he has really underrun heels and some restriction in the lower lumbar, sacrum. I was like, I think we need to fix his feet because it'll lift him up. In my head, this is when I'm
Mm-hmm.
observing he's really heavy on the forehand and heavy in the hand. So she's riding him around and she goes, oh yeah, rides him into the rail, goes like this with her hand. I mean, sorry, she's jerking up with her
Up on my
hand,
mouth.
like
Uh-huh.
lifts him up physically in a very aggressive way. And I was like, oh my, oh, I was actually thinking we need to address it from another another angle. So he basically was like very shut down when I bought him. And
Mm.
so I gave him all of this space to find himself. And it was a very confusing place for him to be. And he was this like huge spiritual journey for me, and a healing journey. So because of his insecurities and because he does not own responsibility for his own beingness,
Mm-hmm.
we had a mantra that we came up with that, and he thinks very highly of himself, as most insecure people do too, right? This like exaggerated sense of importance. So we worked on him moving from this idea of being a prince to being a king. So what are kings? Kings are sovereign.
Mm.
And so I worked on like I am, and I this is like I just don't need to be embarrassed about sharing this because it is
No,
about the
spit
energy
it
of it,
out.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is I am King Elvish, and my body is my kingdom, and I rule my kingdom with compassion, honesty, and whatever it was. I don't remember it now, but my job was to help him move into this sovereign place of being. So, yes, horses do mirror us. And if you're going to bring energy to the barn, they usually will reflect that back. So,
Mm.
if I bring calm to the barn, they're going to match my calmness. My other horse, Mouse, is my rock, right? I can show up to the barn in whatever state I am. And I remember doing a healing session with him and Marcia, and my mom was going through cancer treatment. And I was a mess, and Mouse had like a bilateral injuries to his hind tendons. I'm not sure that was true in hindsight. We did imaging, but anyway, that doesn't matter, but I'm worried about him. Elv is falling apart. I had just gotten him. It was like 2 months after I'd gotten him, and I could tell he's getting ulcery and like I'm like, my world is falling apart. And like I'm worried and I'm not getting to the barn enough. And so I called Marcia and I was like, this is before I did I think it was before I was doing Reiki. And so I called Marcia and I was like, hey, we have to do a healing session on Mouse because, like he's not acting right and blah whatever it was. So and I remember it was winter and it was evening and it was dark and I brought a mounting block into his stall and I sat on the mounting block and I have Marcia on the phone. She works remotely. Energy can go through time and space. So I was like, Marcia, we gotta, and she's an animal communicator too. And so I was like, we gotta work on Mouse. And Mouse immediately tells her, no, we don't need to work on me. Amy's energy is far worse than mine is right now. Like I want to work on her and we have to start at her heart. And I was sitting on the mounting block and he walks up to me and he puts one of his front legs in between my two legs and literally puts his heart against my heart and leads Marcia in this whole session
Wow.
of healing me and bringing me back to myself. And so, no, it's in answer to do they always mirror us? No. And horses can be responsible for their own energy, but
Hmm.
horses also tend to are I see them as healers in their own right. Many horses are healers in their own right, and they do tend to absorb some of our stuff.
Absolutely.
Um, And so that's sort of where I can come in as a Reiki practitioner and help identify and clear some of those energies that our horses absorb off of us. So yeah, they do. Horses also can have a powerful way of clearing themselves too. They're very connected to the earth. Like Mouse can clear on his own. He this weekend I used both of them in my Reiki training. And it was the most fascinating. And Mouse has been telling me for years, he's like, you need to use me to train and help heal. And I was like, I know, Mouse, I know.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know how or what it looked like, or maybe I was avoiding it for my own blocked reasons, but I finally did it. And Mouse I mean, the horses, I mean, talk about horse geek. Like, I am blown away all of the time,
Yeah.
every day when I get to work with horses. So they had all been, this was the second day, and they had received and completed their Reiki training. And so we all stood around Mouse, and I was like, let's just send him energy. But earlier in the day, I was reminded by my own guides, I work with spirit guides, and that Reiki is not something, this is what I read in training. Reiki is not something we do. Reiki is something that we are. So learning Reiki and practicing Reiki is actually this author, Franz Stein, he talks about we all have this inner light that we shine, and through life and experiences, we start to put lampshades over our life, our light.
Interesting.
And so Reiki, the light never changes, right? It's just our experience of the light that changes. So Reiki uncovers, like pulls off the lampshades so we can be a full expression of our energetic selves, right? So
That's
our light.
so beautiful.
Isn't
And
it?
that, yeah, like even when I'm rehabbing horses, it's sort of the same thought
Yeah.
that in there somewhere is a horse that feels safe and comfortable and is in control of their own body
Yeah.
and is built to be an athlete, is created for movement.
Yeah.
And so what I'm doing in rehab a lot is the same thing, sort of trying to pull the lampshades off
Yeah.
and let that light shine through that I
Yeah.
know is in there somewhere.
For sure. And like
Yeah.
that as a sensitive, intuitive, like I intuitively just connect with that light, you know? So
Yeah.
so I bring everybody to Mouse, and with this understanding that in being Reiki, in being the spiritually guided life force energy, or expressing this light, it's a two-way street all of the time. We're not just radiating outward.
Right.
When we're in balance, we're both radiating outward and we're inviting in. So really, Reiki is a when we put our hands on somebody, or if we're in somebody's energetic field, it's sharing. It's this energetic exchange, and they can heal you. And the information that I receive, it's a process of healing those things in myself too, right? Old grief or whatever. So, understanding Reiki as something that we are, and it's this two-way street of energy, so that it's possible that you are receiving healing while you are actually, because it's the other way of looking at it is, um when I step onto the Reiki path, and I've agreed to take as many lampshades off as I can and to shine my light. My work with somebody else is to remind them of who they are, to
Mm.
remind them of their light. So anyway, so we go to work on Mouse, and everybody's standing, they're kind of standing along one side of the wall, and I think I'm at his tail, but I'm really observing. I'm just letting them, and we're practicing the different symbols and stuff. And Mouse is like, you could just say, he's like, yeah. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for. Thank you. And slowly, one by one, he goes to each one of the people. And we had all worked on each other the day before. So we sort of knew where the Reiki wanted to go the most in their bodies. I was not in the table. I was observing and kind of supporting. But so one by one, Mouse went around to them and put his nose on where in the body needed the energy, needed the clearing. And his nose at one point, I wish I had tried to grab him. He loves pockets and treats, his old
Mm.
trainer. would give him peppermints all the time. I mean, he gets enough treats from me, but like
Hmm.
anything in the pocket, junk, like it rips him out of any focus. So
Yeah.
I wanted to be really subtle, and I was trying to pull my phone out because he had his nose on one of my students' feet, and the light was just shining right on his face, on his head, and it was just, and he was grounding her. He was
Hmm.
really bringing her back into her body and into this like place of deep connection. And then he goes around one by one, and the last student, he's at her heart chakra, and then he looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, and he goes back through. He does this like a few times, and then when he's done, he yawns like 3 or 4 times, and he's moving that energy that I think was coming through him. Like this is where you just have to trust whatever's, but I do know the big yawn and the movement of the face he's releasing, right? So he was
Mm.
listening. Horses know how to clear their own energy. Some do. Some they don't feel safe. And when horses don't feel safe, their energy is very, very tight, and it isn't a two-way street. So,
No, and just slowing down, observing horses over the years, it's like even recently, um, my mare passed away at my barn, and my most sort of chilled out, reliable horse in the barn right now was really distressed. Like he was calling for her all day. He was really, really sad, like just
yeah.
looking where she was buried and calling to her all day. And my newest addition to the barn, who is the most anxious and sort of unbalanced emotionally, she spent the whole day near the distressed horse. So my most sort of reliable horse was
Yeah.
very distressed, and my most unreliable horse at the barn just kicked in gear and went,
Yeah.
I'm here for you. And she was so quiet, and she was watching him. He was looking for the mare who had passed and calling to her all day. And all day, this other horse was right at the fence line, as close as she could be to him, and just calm and thoughtful all day, which is not like her at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's so interesting to watch them help each other all the time. And
Yeah.
a lot of times when I get horses in training, especially doing rehab, they're coming in a very emotionally, physically, mentally unbalanced state. And some of my horses, like one horse I had, I watched him. I had a mare who was just so jacked up that when I put her in the pasture with this other horse that I knew was more kind of grounded and helpful, she ran to the corner of the pasture, put her butt in the corner, and would not move 3 days in a row, right? She just wouldn't even graze. She wouldn't move around the pasture. She went to the farthest corner possible, put her tail in the corner, and just stood there stock still until I went out to bring her in. And every day I would watch my horse move closer, little by
Hmm.
little, and just sort of like graze a little closer, move a little closer, but never confront her, never invade.
Yeah.
And finally, by day 3 or 4, that mare was kind of like like Velcro to
Yep.
the horse that helped her.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I did nothing. Like this
Yeah.
was all happening during turnout, not when I was working this new horse. And it's just amazing to see how much they want to help each other
Mhm.
when they feel when they feel safe and comfortable in their own bodies.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess even if they don't, like it really surprised me that this mare looked after my most unbalanced horse, looked after my most laid back horse when he
Right.
was in distress. So I
Yeah.
go,
It's like,
she didn't seem prepared to do that to me, and yet
yeah.
she did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe it feels to me like they're just trying to seek that equilibrium, right? And there's something about the energy of a herd that is it like as you were talking, I'm like, oh, it goes back to that energetic exchange.
Hmm.
When you're feeling unsafe, like you there is no exchange of energy. You're trying to hide your vulnerability. You're
Right.
hiding. And so it's like you are putting walls around yourself. But to keep a herd in harmony, they have to have that exchange of energy. They have to be able to
Absolutely.
feel each other. And I think that that's just the magic that you invite in when you become open. We are all connected. Humans are like that too. That's why, an easy example, have you ever thought about a friend and that the next day they'll call? It's kind of
Yes.
the same thing. It's just like to be open. That's where our strength comes from, is to be open and to receive um, all of that energetic support from all of the places, from
Yeah.
all of the life on Earth. And I think herds instinctively know that. So they want to come into energetic balance where they can be both receivers and givers of energy because it keeps them safe.
Yeah,
So,
and there's a thought out there that the dominant horse in a herd is sort of the biggest badass out there. And I
oh,
go, what I've
no.
seen over and over and over through the years is always horses reach out to the vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's actually the herd leadership is the one who
Yeah.
protects and the one who helps. It's not
Because
the
they're
one
helping
who
them
runs
listen. Yeah.
around biting the other ones. Like that's
No,
not
no,
the herd
no. I
leader.
mean, just like people always call alpha dogs the ones that bite and are super aggressive. It's like, no, no, no.
No.
That's the status seeking, insecure dog that's doing
Yes.
that. And same with horses.
Same with
So,
horses.
yeah. So it's usually the quiet ones because what keeps them safe? Their ability to listen, their
Yeah.
ability to receive energy.
Yeah.
So their ability to feel that predator. And so if one horse isn't listening, that horse isn't going to be safe, right?
Right.
Or the
And the
one horse
herd
isn't
steps in
receiving.
and says, yeah, and
Here, let me
offers
help
support.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's a
It's like a
kindness to
web.
them. Yes. Yes.
That's so I never really looked at it that way, but that's so cool to for you to be able to observe that in your own herd.
Yeah. And it's just to stand back and observe.
Yeah.
They have a lot to show us and a lot
Yeah.
of things that we assume as humans, and we're just dead wrong.
Right.
Like we just don't understand. I go, to me, the leader of the herd is a parental role. It's not
Oh,
the biggest
yeah.
badass. It's
Mm-mm.
like, it's the
Kind,
one to
compassionate.
support, set boundaries when needed.
Yes,
They do
for sure.
that. But I
Yep.
go, it's more like a parental role than it is a dictator. I
Oh,
go, it's
yeah.
not like that.
No, they're teachers, like
Hmm.
the lead horse in the herd is a teacher. So, and a nurturer. And yes,
Yes.
the boundaries, like you need to have boundaries and rules in order to feel safe, right? So, and I
Well,
think
and
that,
I've watched them ostracize horses that are screaming and yelling and
yeah,
acting out and out of control. They kind of get pushed away from the
yeah,
group or they get
yep,
ignored.
yep,
Like they just don't feed that insecure energy.
yeah.
So, anyways, I know you have another appointment and you need to get going, so we can wrap it up.
Oh,
But
this
this
has
has
been
been a
so
great
fun.
conversation.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
I think that there was one last thing I wanted to share, but I um I don't remember now. It's for another day. It was
Yeah.
something about that, but it's okay. This has been amazing, and I've loved getting to know you and being a part of this podcast. So it's really special.
Well, and thank you guys for joining us. Again, it's Amy Potter, and From the Earth Creative is the name of your business. And you have a website? Like
I do.
I will
Yeah.
put all the details in the description box and show notes.
Great.
So if you
Great.
guys want to reach out to Amy, you said you work remotely because
I do.
energy doesn't know time or space.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so whether it's with a horse or a human,
Hmm.
you work
I work on
remotely.
dogs and cats or cats actually. We were just joking. I work on typically if it's a cat, it's a very ill cat because otherwise cats are like, my energy is better than yours.
Yeah, I'm fine.
But yes,
You are my problem. I'm fine.
yes, no, yeah. But yeah, I work on animals, and but mostly horses and humans. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a little bit of a tough relationship for humans to really understand horses and for horses understand humans better than we understand them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm glad you're working in that area.
Yeah, I know you just reminded me. So I especially with horses, I look a lot of what I do is actually to help be a conduit for the horse's voice. Not only do I help them balance their body energetically, but you were talking about we as humans sometimes have a tough time slowing down and just observing our horses. And so much gets lost in micro communications in the horse,
Hmm.
like a flick of an ear, tail, a swish of a tail. They're like, oh, my horse always does that. I was like, yeah, there's a mechanical reason, and it's not great that your horse is swishing his tail after every jump. So
Right.
we miss so much of our micro communications with our horse, and we don't listen. So much of what I do is actually unblocking the voice, unblocking the throat chakra, and
Mm.
allowing the horse to have a voice and to say, "Hey, this is really bothering me. You're sitting crooked. You're riding with your right hand higher than your left, and it's creating imbalance in my body." Or I don't like the stall that I'm in, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
So, energy, when I have my hands on a horse, like this is the kind of thing that they share with me. Sometimes they don't, and sometimes I really just work on them on a silent energy level. But I look at my job as kind of being a voice for the horses.
That's
So
beautiful.
and
Yeah.
then facilitating that human horse bond.
Yeah.
And when horses feel heard and listened to, they usually take this like big exhale. It's just like, oh, thank you. I've been trying to communicate that, and they're not listening. And even if we're trying to listen, sometimes we just miss it, you know? So it's
Yeah.
not a judgment,
No, it's
but
not a judgment. It is a
no,
difficult relationship to, and I've been called a marriage counselor more than
yeah,
once. It's
for
like,
sure. Yeah. It's learning how to
yeah,
communicate
abs
in that beautiful space of receptivity or the learning brain, as you call it. So it's opening
yeah.
up that space of connection. So that's what I help do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and horses have a lot to say when you
they
start
sure
letting them
do.
share their opinion.
They sure do.
Well, thank you so
Well,
much for doing this podcast. I'll have to have you back. It's such an interesting topic,
I love
and
it.
and to sort of take some of the not to reduce the magic,
Yeah,
but to take sort of the unattainable woo-woo side of it out. I go, this is a
yeah,
very practical way of working with horses is through
it
energy
is.
because they are primarily nonverbal communicators. Like
Correct.
they're
Correct.
not like dogs who bark and bark and bark. They
Right.
they primarily communicate through energy and
Yeah.
body language and
Yep.
expression. So getting to know that, it kind of it does bring out the magic of the relationship, I gotta say, but
Yeah.
it's not a mystical, unattainable
Mhm.
thing we have to kind of
No.
either believe in or we're not capable of.
Right.
It's like we're all capable of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's why the working with the horses was so it made me more confident in what I do is because
Yeah.
they gave me very physical, visceral responses to just
Yes.
sending energy to them. So you're like, oh, what I do is real and it's not woo-woo, you
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Oh,
yeah. And
there goes
it's
the
very,
cat tail
she's
again.
like, we're done. Quit talking,
Yeah,
mom.
I'm getting the hook. She's at
Yeah.
almost every Zoom meeting I'm on now, and it's like as soon
Yeah.
as I hit around an hour, the next
Huh?
thing I'll get tapped on the shoulder with her paw,
And she's
like
like, and your energy
like
changes
that.
too. So, right when we're
Yeah.
ready to close, our energy closes up and she can sense that. She's like, oh, mom's getting ready to end her Zoom. I can feel it. Oh, she's so
It's
beautiful. Well, thanks
hilarious.
again, Kirsten. And yeah, I would love to come back anytime.
Okay, and Amy, I will have all your contact information in the description box in the show notes so you guys can reach out to her if you want to know what your horse has to say or if you want to get some energy work done on yourself or your horse. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and look
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing you on the next episode of the Horse Geeks podcast.